Taylor. Charles Taylor is one of the most outstanding figure in the philosophical and sociological study of secularization. He was a 2007 Milton Prize. It is the Nobel Prize for history and the history of religions. His books have been translated in Italian, and they are amongst the classic texts in philosophy. I don't want to steal any more time. The floor now to Giuliano Amato for his speech. I'll try to be very clear and short, to stick to the time allocated. Speaking about Europe and not the national experience, the Polish presidency will be concerned with European public space, public life, and not only national one. So, because the problem of the relationship between religious pluralism and the presence of religion in the public space can best be understood if you think of European context and the history of Europe rather than you think of the individual countries. Because individual countries, there are experiences that were marked by the prevalence of one or the other religion, and also marked by a concept of secularization, of secularism, which is typically French. God has nothing to do with Caesar's space, provided that we remember that in the US, secularism means exactly the opposite. Caesars should not meddle with God's sphere and space, and the First Amendment, which is always mentioned to grant the freedom of thought, guarantees freedom of religious expression before it guarantees freedom of thinking. To realize that some concepts that come from national experiences are concepts and notions that might sound slippery. I limit myself to these two remarks, which are important for this discussion. To deny the relevance of this issue is definitely not understandable. I recently read on some of the Italian newspapers, finance and economy are faring badly, so let's deal with serious matters and let's leave aside the topic of religion and secularism. I was a bit crude in this, but this would be the same as forgetting the future we are heading to. This is a future where religions will be part of the public discussion, will play a role in the public discussion. Today, it is useless to question the legitimacy of the presence of religion in the public space. For those who understood that to leave religion in what is non-temporal, in spirituality, dealing with something else, deletes what is the most important element for believers today, the discovery of what is sacred, of the religious sense in the human life. This old distinction can no longer be accepted, and this I take for granted. The problem of democracy that Krzysztof was posing is the problem of the relationship that there is between the opinions inspired by religious beliefs and opinions inspired by other religious beliefs.
Sentimenti ispirati non da religione. Giustamente.
Rightly so. Birkenfurter was mentioned. His paradox was that democracy promises freedom and rights, but the guarantee of this freedom and these rights does not lie in legal institutions, but in the pre-legal foundation of the society that aims at being democratic. Then the meeting of these different spheres, these different spaces, could it jeopardize democracy? Well, it could if human beings make mistakes, if human beings do not accept what European lessons taught to them. Europe today is running the risk of forgetting all this. This is essential to me because you see, some years ago, a French scholar, Jacques Derrida, wrote that Europe finds itself in between two extremes, between its Euro-centered approach. I am the bearer of values, of rights, of freedoms, and I can teach them to the rest of the world, and what Derrida called the amnesiac alterity, the acceptance of all differences, of all diversities, neglecting one's self, one's values, the exact opposite of the Euro-centered position and approach. And this is what triggered amongst Catholics the attack to relativism. Now, I criticized Derrida, not so much because this was not true, but because this is less true today. Because today we fluctuate from the Euro-centered approach, the democratic Euro-centered approach. We are the bearers of the democratic values, and an intolerant Euro-centered approach, a xenophobian Euro-centered approach, an Euro-centered approach who is enemy of the other, who believes that all those who are different from our majority are our enemies. So we can either be masters of tolerance or intolerant towards others. And this is where the problem lies. And if you look at Europe, you see that in various European countries, not only parties, but also civil movements are developing. And all these movements are against, where the cultural and religious identity is confirmed but against. In a country like Italy, at the end of the day, luckily enough, the day after the killing of a Catholic priest, the Pope said, the dialogue with Muslim people is relevant to us, is important to us, and we'll keep having this dialogue with them. But this is not enough. A lot can be learned from what Charles Taylor wrote. I would advise you to read Sources of the Self, which was translated into Italian, where he reminds us all of how the European identity was shaped. And this European identity is the result, the outcome of very many influences that contributed to shaping the ethnic groups, the cultural groups, the religion orientations of Europeans, across centuries of clashes or wars, but at the end